Chapter 3. You are in for trouble. Nancy looked at the ancient Asa Sidney with deep perplexity, wondering who Jenny could be. "I think you are mistaken," she said, smiling. "I am Nancy Drew, and this is the first time I have ever been here before." "Oh, how very queer!" She set her tray down upon a bench and pointed to a portrait, an oil painting of a golden-haired young woman in the high-waisted, puffed-sleeved style of the 1850s. The dress was similar in general appearance to the frock Nancy wore, and the girl was quick to realize that in the flickering candlelight, she must have appeared to the suddenly awakened old man very much like the portrait come to life. A tall and artistically tapered candle of opalescent green burned before the painting, its gently wavering light making the subject of the picture appear to breathe. I must have been dreaming," old Asa Sidney murmured, dropping his arms and shaking his hoary head. "Well, well," he continued, "that is all we old folks have left. If it were not for our dreams, we should be poor indeed." Nancy was silent, not certain just what reply, if any, was expected from her. "However," Asa Sidney said, looking at her with a smile in his eyes, "I think I shall have to get myself some glasses. You were a very pretty vision as you entered the room, and while drowsing here, I seem to see my dear wife step down from the picture up there. If I can't tell a very pretty and very much alive young woman from a very old piece of canvas and paint, then I shall have to visit an oculist. Well, one can't expect one's eyes to last much over 100 years. May I congratulate you on your birthday?" Asa Sidney laughed, a little bitterly. "Pardon me, my dear," he said, as he resumed his seat. "I am a lonely and soured old hermit. It is of no consequence that this is my birthday. Sadie is a good girl, a very thoughtful young person, to remember a date that means nothing to me and less to anybody else." "Surely it is worthwhile to celebrate one's 100th birthday," Nancy cried. "Why, your name should be in the papers, and your picture, too." "No, no," protested the old man. "That is all vanity and display. Why should I be honored for an accident? I have not tried to live longer than anyone else. I have read interviews in the newspapers. The reporters always ask the centenarians how they have lived so long, and one old codger will say he lived to be 100 because he never ate meat, and in the next county another will say he attributes his old age to the fact that he never ate anything but meat. Ha, ha! The only reason one lives to be 100 is because one has not died before." Nancy shuddered a little. Plainly, Mr. Sidney was far from happy. "No, no," the centenarian continued. "Very, very few persons know Asa Sidney is alive at all, and none of those love the old man, except Sadie, perhaps. She is the only one who ever visits me for the sake of friendship alone." "I have 2 jolly friends downstairs," Nancy said somewhat shyly, because she did not know how a plan she had suddenly evolved would be received. "May we have our tea up here with you, as a sort of little birthday party? And perhaps Sadie will join us." "Eh? What's that? What did you say your name was?" Asa asked sharply. "Nancy Drew," the girl answered, a little hurt at the strange reception her request had received. "My father is Carson Drew, the attorney." "An attorney, eh? And why did you come to see me this afternoon?" I didn't come to see you at all, Nancy replied, somewhat nettled. My friends and I were caught in the storm and stopped here. Quite by chance, I had the opportunity of doing Sadie a small service in bringing this tray up to you. The tray? Oh, yes, indeed. I had quite forgotten about it, Asa said. Well, well, Nancy, I do not think I have had a caller for 10 years, although it may have been all my fault. Bring up your young friends, please do. Tell Semit to send up a real spread. Tell him it's my order. I own the house, so that is quite all right, you see. He can deduct it from the rent. Ha, ha, ha. All of the old man's conversation only strengthened Nancy's conviction that she was in the presence of mystery and drama. She sped down the stairs to rejoin George and Bess, and found her chums seated at a table on which a teapot steamed. There you are at last, Bess cried. I've almost died sitting here being polite, while all the time this was teasing me with its perfume. This proved to be a plateful of golden cinnamon toast, from which Bess lifted the cover. Wait a minute, Nancy cried. Put the cover back. Wait still another minute? Oh, Nancy, what did I ever do to you to deserve such cruelty? Bess wailed. We're going to have supper here, Nancy announced. I'll call Hannah, and she can telephone to your folks. That will save us telephone tolls. And we will eat upstairs with the oldest man any of you ever saw. He is 100 years old today. George knit her brows. Did he invite us? She asked. We don't know him, do we? This is sort of mysterious. That's just the reason why Nancy is so enthusiastic, Bess laughed. I think it is a splendid idea, if we can have a better spread than cinnamon toast. She rang the bell industriously, and Sadie came to answer the summons. Sadie, Nancy said, we are all going to have our supper with Mr. Sidney. He asked us. Please tell Mr. Semit to come here. Semit, whose voice the girls had heard in argument with Sadie, proved to be a tall, rather heavy-set man, slightly bald as to brow, but wearing long sideburns in the style of English butlers. Yes, miss, the manager asked, his voice purring, his hands clasped as he bowed to Nancy. We have decided to have a more substantial meal, Nancy said. Of course, we will pay for the tea and toast. Semit bowed more deeply. We shall have some jellied consomme, sliced breast of chicken, hearts of lettuce with Roquefort dressing, nut bread with sweet butter, and mocha layer cake, Nancy recited, mentioning the items that had appeared on Sadie's tray for Mr. Sidney. That sounds very good to me, murmured Bess. Especially the cake. Is it a 3-layered variety? Semit looked at the famished Bess. His pale blue eyes roved over the plump figure, making the girl a bit uneasy. I would rather have French dressing on my salad, announced George, as she watched the man before her, and cheese crackers on the side. Well, I'll see the missus, he said slowly. We like straight orders here. We're not used to having girls come here telling us how to fix things, but if you... He hesitated, and Nancy realized at once it was a question of money which bothered the innkeeper. You shall receive extra pay, declared Nancy firmly, for your trouble. This satisfied the man, who bowed and said, I shall hurry your orders, miss. One thing more, Nancy said. We want this meal served in the tower room with Mr. Sidney, and I should like very much to have your permission that Sadie join us. The suave, sleek Semit bristled. His eyes bulged in his crimson face. What is the meaning of this? What do you know of the tower room? Why, who are you? It doesn't matter, Nancy smiled. We wish to celebrate Mr. Sidney's birthday with him, and he wishes us to dine with him. However, I shall pay well for the supper, as I have promised to pay for the tray Sadie took up to him." "It will be $10, Semit announced, his eyes narrowing. "That's quite all right," Nancy replied, "if the price includes Mr. Sidney's and Sadie's suppers." Nancy's air of authority cowed the man. He bowed again and left the room, shaking his head and rubbing his hands together. "I guess he thought I wouldn't pay so much," Nancy laughed as she rummaged through her purse. 5 and 2 is 7. 8. Can somebody lend me $1? "Surely," George replied, tossing folded bills across the table. "There are $2 for my share of the celebration." "No, you are my guests," Nancy said. "I'll pay this back, George. Now I must telephone to Hannah and tell her that we are going to miss dinner at home." "Maybe I had better take you up and introduce you to Mr. Sidney first. There's lots of time to call up Hannah later." As Nancy led her chums toward the stairs, Sadie entered the room to clear the table, and Nancy turned back and spoke to her. "Let Semit do that," she said. "I'll need your help upstairs. And you are to have supper with us. Do you hear?" "Yes, he told me," Sadie replied timorously. "He wasn't particularly pleased, but he does not wish to offend a patron or lose a big order. Business is not very good." "I'm glad he thinks I'm a worthwhile customer," answered Nancy. "I'm sure he didn't at first." Bess was counting the tables. "I guess you do quite a business here," she observed, "when the place is crowded." "Yes, we do on Sunday nights and holidays especially," agreed the frail girl. "It isn't easy work, is it, Sadie?" asked Nancy. "Those heavy trays weigh a good bit, don't they?" "Oh, yes. Sometimes my arms ache, and always my legs hurt me from standing so much. I really should be taller, I suppose. I have to be on my feet all the time," she added with a tired smile, "and my shoes aren't comfortable to stand in." There was an air of daintiness and refinement about the young waitress, which was apparent despite Sadie's cheap clothing and menial position. "Are you allowed to keep the tips that you receive from the generous patrons you wait on?" inquired George, somewhat bluntly, but nevertheless effectively. Nancy had been hoping she might learn something of the arrangement that the man Semit had with this girl, but she had not thought it wise to broach the subject on such short acquaintanceship. George felt differently. Sadie became confused and red. She looked at the floor, and the girls thought they detected a tear on her pale cheek, but she answered bravely, "I haven't anything. I can't keep anything. They don't think I'm old enough yet to receive pay for my work. But now I'd better go, or else—" "I thought you would eat upstairs," pleaded Bess. "Why, what can be the harm if you have supper with us?" Nancy asked. "I am taking George and Bess up to meet Mr. Sidney, and then I am going to telephone home that I shall be late. I'll help you carry the things upstairs." "Oh, no, please don't," Sadie cried. Nancy led her two chums up the tower stairs, her brow wrinkled in thought. Sadie was evidently unhappy. She was not the Semits' own daughter. Was it a case of a mistreated adopted child? She puzzled. Then, too, there seemed to be a queer bond between the thin, timid girl and the bearded hermit. She had arrived at no conclusion when she reached the door of the tower room and knocked. Bess and George gave a little start when they saw the hoary and ancient figure whom Nancy greeted. "I am afraid you will find this strange tower of mine scarcely prepared for your delightful visit," Mr. Sidney said with quaint courtesy. "I rarely have lady callers. About 1 every 10 years is above the average. However, such as they are, my quarters are at your disposal." Now, for the first time, Nancy had a chance to look about her and survey the room. It was very large, as had been said before, and candles were gleaming everywhere. There was a fireplace on one side of the room, and a broad couch which evidently served the recluse as a bed at night. Mr. Sidney dragged out a commodious, low rocking chair and arranged black oak armchairs of Civil War vintage on either side of it. "You, my dear," he said with a bow to Nancy, "must take the seat of honor and act as hostess." "Thank you, but before I sit down, I must telephone home," Nancy said. "Sadie is coming to have supper with us. Fortunately, it is a cold spread, so your meal will not suffer from your kindness in waiting until ours arrives." The aged man produced a table elaborately carved in the fashion of a bygone era. With a pocket knife, he scratched off driblets of tallow from its surface. Nancy surmised that except for the painting of his wife in her youth, Mr. Sidney had no enthusiasm for decoration. The only other objects on the wall were framed texts, which seemed to be patent grants from the government. One entire side of the room was taken up with a long work table, a charcoal furnace something like a blacksmith's, together with pots, pans, dye vats, bars of tallow, beeswax, and other similar materials, and row upon row of polished candle molds. George and Bess were silent, obviously a little frightened at their strange surroundings and the remarkable spectacle the old man made as he moved about the room, scoffing at himself for being slow and clumsy. The candlelight made an aura of glowing silver out of his mass of hair. "Oh, I am forgetting about my telephone call," Nancy exclaimed. "Please excuse me." As she felt her way down the dark stairway, Nancy heard someone ascending. It was Semit, grumbling under his breath and carrying a large covered tray. A few steps behind came Sadie, similarly burdened. "Ah, miss, I'll be ready for you in a moment," Semit said pleasantly enough. "I'm going to telephone," Nancy explained. "The booth is at the end of the first hall," Semit directed. Nancy had some trouble in establishing the connection with River Heights. Evidently, the storm had worked havoc with the lines. At last, however, she heard the voice of Hannah Gruen, the kindly and efficient housekeeper of the Drew household. "Hello, this is Nancy," the girl explained.
"Praise be! I was sure you had been in a smash-up,"
Hannah exclaimed.
"Where are you now?"
"I don't know exactly where," Nancy replied. "Someplace in the country, about 20 miles from home. We took shelter from the storm in the most interesting old tea room. Please do not wait supper for me, Hannah. I will eat here, and Bess and George are staying with me. Hello?" There was a sharp clicking on the wire, and then a long buzzing. Nancy rattled the receiver. "Hello? Hello! Oh, the line is dead. I've been cut off," she cried. "Hello? Hello?"
"Number, please?"
a voice asked languidly. "I was cut off from River Heights," Nancy explained. "Will you please make the connection?"
"Hold the wire, please."
Nancy's foot tapped the floor impatiently as the voice was succeeded by a buzz, and the buzz by a series of clicks. At last she heard Hannah expostulating at the other end.
"Sort of service."
The woman's voice sounded indignantly.
"You'd think I was talking to China or the South Pole."
"Hello, here I am," Nancy interrupted. "Will you call up George's home and Bess's and explain that I am keeping them out for supper?"
"Yes, but I'll have to tell them where you are,"
Hannah warned. "We are eating with an old man, a wonderful old man," Nancy explained. "His name is Sidney, Asa Sidney. He is a
"Asa Sidney! Now you are in for trouble,"
Hannah almost shouted over the phone.
Especially...
Click. The connection was broken again, and although she tried for 5 minutes, Nancy could not get Hannah on the wire again. She climbed the stairs, more puzzled than ever. How could Asa Sidney get her into trouble? How did Hannah know about him? End of chapter 3.